The man who set a table for strangers. On hospitality to the unknown dead. A man set a table each evening for guests he did not know. He had begun the practice in his 35th year. He had not, before that year, been a particularly hospitable man. He had been, in his early 30s, an ordinary husband and father, the keeper of a small tannery, the holder of certain modest religious beliefs that he had inherited from his parents and that he had not, in his adult life, examined. In his 35th year, his eldest child had died. The child had been 6. The child had died of a fever in the space of 3 days. The fever had come on in the evening of a Sunday. The child had been buried on the following Friday. The man had not in the 4 days between slept. He had sat by the child's bed. He had held the small hand. He had watched the small face become, over the 4 days, less and less the face he had known. After the burial, he had gone back to his house. He had sat at his table. His wife had gone, in her grief, to her own parents' house in another town. She had needed, she said, the company of her mother. He had not gone with her. He had sat at the table. He had understood in the sitting that the table was incomplete. There had been 4 chairs around the table, one for him, one for his wife, one for the eldest child, one for the small daughter who was, at the time, 3 years old. The eldest child's chair was empty. He had moved the chair to the wall. The table had been, after the moving, smaller. The smallness had been intolerable. He had moved the chair back. He had set that evening the eldest child's place, the small bowl, the small cup, the small spoon, the small plate. He had set it for nothing. The child was in the ground. The setting was, in some sense, a private act of mourning, but he had set it. He had set it again the next evening. He had set it every evening, in fact, for the next year. His wife had come back, in due course, from her parents' house. She had seen the small place setting. She had not, at first, said anything. After some weeks, she had asked him to stop. The setting, she said, was making her grief worse. He had stopped for some weeks. He had felt, in those weeks, that some essential function of the table was not being performed. He had taken up the setting again. His wife had, by then, accepted it. She had also begun to understand, in her own way, that the setting was not, in any deep sense, only about the eldest child. In his 36th year, he began to set additional places. He could not at first have explained why. He set them in the beginning almost at random, a place at the foot of the table, a place beside his own, a place at the small chair the daughter no longer used. The places were for no one in particular. They were simply set. By the end of the year, he had developed the habit of setting 12 places. The number had arrived in him in some way he had not chosen. He had been setting one evening the 7th place, and he had thought, not 7, 12. He had set 12. He had felt in the setting that 12 was the correct number. He had not asked himself why. He had only continued. He set out 12 places. He cooked the meals he imagined his guests would eat. This was the more elaborate part of the practice. He had decided in the first months that the setting alone was not enough. He should cook also for the guests. He could not, without information, cook precisely for them, but he could cook the kind of food he thought they might eat. He imagined them. He cooked bread in any case, because bread was eaten by everyone. He cooked some kind of meat, sometimes mutton, sometimes pork, sometimes chicken. He cooked vegetables of the season. He prepared in the autumn fruit, in the winter preserves. He set the dishes on the table. He sat at the head of the table alone and ate his portion and went to bed. He did this for 7 years. His wife mocked him in the beginning. She said the food would go cold. She said the candles were wasted, for he had begun in the 2nd year to light candles as well. She said no one would come. She had said in the 3rd year, in some frustration, that he was, in his persistence, becoming strange, that the village had begun to talk, that her sister had asked her if he was well. He had listened. He had not, in any of the 7 years, defended the practice. He had not made an argument for it. He had simply continued. His wife had, after the 3rd year, stopped mocking him. She had not, however, joined in the practice. She ate her meals with him at the table, in her own place, which he did not, of course, also set elaborately for her. Place was set as a wife's place would normally be, but she did not, in those years, eat with the imagined guests in any sense beyond her presence at the meal. In the 7th year, on a winter evening, there was a knock at the door. He had been about to sit down to dinner. The table was set, as it had been every evening for 7 years. The candles were lit. The bread was warm. The mutton was on a platter at the center. He had been pouring the wine when the knock came. He set down the bottle. He went to the door. He opened it. 12 strangers stood in the snow. They were not in any obvious way alike. They were of various ages, some old, some middle-aged, 2 who were children, 1 infant in the arms of a young woman. They were dressed in various clothes. Some of the clothes were of the village's region, but in styles a century or more out of date. Some were of regions he could not identify, in clothing he had only seen in old books. They had on close inspection a certain quality in common. They were all in their bodies slightly less substantial than living people. He could see them clearly. They were not transparent, but they were somehow lighter than the snow they stood in. They left no footprints. They did not give their names. They did not need to. He understood in seeing them what they were. He stepped aside. They came in. They walked in their light steps to the table. They sat in the places he had set. Each of them, somehow, went to the place that had been intended for them, though he had not, in any conscious way, set the places for anyone in particular. The infant was set in the small wooden chair he had been using for an additional setting. The wood somehow supported her. The old men sat where the old men's places had been set. The children sat where the children's places had been set. They ate the food he had cooked. He had not, in 7 years, known what they would eat. He had cooked, in those 7 years, a great variety of dishes. They ate on this evening the mutton, the bread, the winter vegetables, the wine. They ate slowly. They ate with a kind of attention he had not, in his life, seen at any other table. They were eating, he understood, food they had not, in their own lives, had enough of. They had been hungry for some time. They did not, while eating, speak. He sat at the head of the table. He ate his own portion. He did not, in his eating, look at them too directly. He understood that the looking would be, in some way, intrusive. He looked at them peripherally. He saw in their faces the kind of relief that is unmistakable. When the meal was done, they stood up. They thanked him quietly with their eyes. They did not, in their leaving, speak. They walked in single file to the door. He opened it for them. They stepped out into the snow. They did not, in their walking, leave footprints. They turned when they reached the edge of his small yard and looked back at him. He raised his hand. They were gone. He closed the door. He sat at the empty table for a long time. His wife came in. She had been watching from the kitchen where she had been making tea. She had seen the 12 through the window. She had not, in the meal, joined them. She had felt in the seeing that the meal was for her husband, not for her. She had been waiting in the kitchen until they left. She sat beside him at the empty table. "Who were they?" she asked. "They were the ones I did not have words for," he said. He had not until that moment known how to describe them. The description, when it came, arrived with a kind of clarity he had not, in 7 years of setting the table, had. They had no other house to come to. The other houses had no table set. They had been walking for years. Some of them, by the look of them, for hundreds of years. The table I have been setting was not, in the end, for the eldest child. The eldest child has been, in his own country, well taken care of. The table was for the ones who had no one to feed them. They have, by their own account, been hungry. They came when the table had been set for 7 years, with 12 places every evening in this village. The setting somehow made the house findable for them. Other houses in other villages are findable for other 12s. There are, I think, many 12s. There are not, however, many houses. His wife sat with this. "Should I help?" she said. He had not expected her to ask. "If you wish." She helped him set the table the next evening. She helped him, in fact, for the rest of their lives. The 12, the same 12, the first ones never came back. But other strangers came. They came in 2s and 3s, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups of 5 or 6. They were always different. They were always silent. They always thanked him with their eyes. They always ate. The man and his wife continued the practice for 40 years. When he died, the wife continued it. When she died, their daughter, the small daughter who had been 3 at the start, and who was, by then, a grown woman with her own family, continued it. She had not fully understood the practice when she had been a child. She had assumed in her childhood that her father was somewhat eccentric in his table arrangements. She had, in her own adulthood, watched the meals occasionally. She had seen once, when she had come home unexpectedly, a small group of strangers at the table. She had understood. She had taken up the practice when her mother could no longer set the candles. The house became known in the region as the house where the dead were fed. It was not called that aloud. It was understood. The neighbors, who had been suspicious of the practice in the early years, had become, over the decades, respectful of it. They did not themselves set tables, but they appreciated, in their own quiet ways, that someone in the village did. The dead, when they passed through the region, had a house to go to. The region was, somehow, a more comfortable region to die in than the neighboring regions, which did not have such a house. The house has, in some generation of the family, always had a table set. It is, in some province, still set. The strangers in some month still come. Set the table for the guests you do not know. Cook the food you cannot name. They will not come forth. Many years they will come, they have no other house. To come to, the work is the setting, not the welcoming. The setting, when it has been done for 7 years. With 12 places, makes the house findable for the dead. Other houses are not findable. The dead have been walking for hundreds of years, some of them. Hungry, they are grateful for the table. They thank you with their eyes. The practice continues in the family. Some generation will, in time, lose it. Another, in time, will take it up.